What's up, you guys? It's Bommelts here, back at it again with another SC25 video. Today we have a tier list for our defenders, and this video is going to show all the defenders that I see that are relevant to division rivals and foot champs. So if you see a few defenders that are missing, it's because I never matchmake up against them because people aren't using the cards enough. But with that being said, let's get into the tier list for today's video. Okay, so getting into the tier list, as you can see, S is the best, A is very good, B is average, C is below average, and D means stay away from. Okay, so starting the tier list, we have S being the best, A being very good, B being average, C below average, and D means stay away from. As you can see, there are a lot of defenders in the list below, and there's about 108 players selected. So just sit back and relax. You might see a few outdated cards, some cards that aren't even evolved because I have it left purposely that way. I don't know how to get the graphic art for that and to put in the tier list, but I'll tell you if it's S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. So starting out, we have Kim and J, Thunderstruck. Obviously he's outdated, but I would throw this card in S tier when he's Team of the Year Evo. This card is a unit to go up against. But if we're talking about just the Thunderstruck alone, he's B tier. So I'm going to put him here, but his Team of the Year Evo is an absolute problem. I tell you, this card is very tough to go up against. I would throw him in the S tier position. Now we have Laurent Blanc, base card. As you can see, his base icon's 88 rated. He's B tier, but if you were to throw him in that evolution that we had for the icon a couple weeks ago, he is borderline A tier and S tier. So I'm gonna put him in the B tier spot for now. Now we have Prime Hero Jamie Carragher. This card, B tier. He used to be somewhat good, but after the latest few patches, he's not as good as he once was. Now we have Winter Wild Cards Vintage. This card, solid B tier. He's average. He's not above average. He just sits there perfectly in the B tier spot. But again, you know, some people were lucky enough to own his base card and they threw him in the Team of the Year Evo. He sits comfortably in the S tier position. There are so many evolution combinations that you can put on Vintage just to get him in that S tier spot, with Intercept being available through the Winter Wild Cards Evo. And, you know, people combo that with the Team of the Year Evolution, but the Winter Wild card sits perfectly in the B tier position. Now we have Cordoba, his track stars. This card, again, B tier. He was A tier at one point, but through this latest patch, he just isn't cutting it. I own this card. He's just not making it anywhere higher. Okay, so now we have Danilo, the Juventus Winter Wild card. He's no longer in the game, but, you know, he is a perfectly comfortable center back to sit in the B tier spot. Now, here we are with Shar, the Newcastle card. This card was a very fun card to use. Packed him through foot champs. You had to get him through the objective for the token swaps. This card sits B tier, borderline C tier now. He isn't as good as he once was. I feel like 80 pace isn't cutting it right now at this current stage of the game. Delit, he's C tier. I played this card. I'm an IFN myself. He just doesn't have enough defensive play styles to compensate for what he is in his current position. Now we have FC Pro Hendricks. This card, he's average, nothing too special. I don't like his animations. He sits C tier. Now we have Winter Wild card Nuno Mendes. This card, pretty solid, you know, great value SBC, just like the Walmart. I throw him between borderline B and C tier. There's a lot better left backs in the game, such as Dio Hernandez. We'll get to that very soon. Next card that we have up is Gusto's Chelsea right back Conference League card. This card sits comfortably in the A tier position. He's one of the French right backs that we have available in this game that are very good. Next card that we have is Numero Foot Vanderson. This card sits at the B tier spot, C tier, borderline, nothing too special here. Okay, so now the next card that we have is Bradley, Liverpool's right back. His card right now sits comfortably in the B tier position, but if you throw him in the Evo that's available now, A tier. He is a solid right back to use in Evo. Okay, so I zoomed in a little bit because the graphic card that we have is Scalvini. This card, somewhat solid. He has Anticipate Plus, especially the new patch. He sits in the A tier position, and if you Evo him, he is actually pretty good. He's borderline A and S tier. Okay, so the next card that we have is Pacheco. We got her through the season ladder last season. She's not very good in the game. She sits C and borderline B tier. Next card that we have is the Future Stars Murillo. He sits comfortably in the A tier position. You can evo him to get him a little bit higher, better in stats, but he's nothing too crazy as there's a lot better center backs out there. Next card that we have is Man City's new center back signing, Kuzanov. He is decent in game. I do like how this card is formatted. If you throw him in the evo, he becomes much better. He's borderline A and S tier. Next card that we have is End of an Era Jesus Navas. This card was a very fun card to use in the beginning stage of the game when he first released, but sadly he's fallen out of the meta curve. He sits borderline B and C tier as there's much better right backs that are currently available in today's era. Next card that we have is center back Winter Wildcards Parejo. This card's not very good right now at this current stage of the game. He sits comfortably in the C tier position. The next card up on this list we have is Eric Bailly's Numero Foot. This card is somewhat decent. He is borderline C and B tier. Okay, so now we have Winter Wildcard hero Alex Scott. She's not that good in game. She sits comfortably in the C tier position. The next center back we have on this list is Arsenal's center back Gabriel. Now, if you were lucky enough to evo him and get all the playstyles that you needed through the evo chain for his team of the week or even his gold card, his team of the year evolution sits S tier. This card was very hard to go up against in foot chance, but his Trailblazer sits comfortably in the C tier position. So the next card we have next on this list is Jensen. Her card isn't that great. The Winter Wild card sits comfortably in the D tier position. I advise you guys to stay away from this card. Okay, so the next Numero Foot we have on this list, we have Numero Foot Hato. This card sits borderline C and B tier. Okay, so now we have Steve McManon's Winter Wild card right back card. This card is solid to go up against. He is somewhat decent in game, surprisingly, even when he's formatted as a defender. He's actually good. He sits comfortably in the A tier position. Okay, so the next center back we have on this list is Europa League Gigot. His card is not that good. He sits borderline B and A tier. Okay, so now this is where it gets interesting. There is Rio Ferdinand. Now, this card alone, A tier position. I have this card in game. He is a unit, and I was lucky enough to get him in the evolution. I would throw him S tier. I'm gonna put him borderline A and S tier. This card is very good to use in game. Okay, so the next card we have on this list is Gwen's Team of the Year Honorable Mentions. The one card that everybody thought that they packed a Team of the Year in, unfortunately, was a Team of the Year Honorable Mentions Gwen. Now, I tried her card in game. She's not very good. She sits comfortably between borderline A and B tier. All right, so now the next card we have on this list, we have Track Stars Lizaru. This card was decent to use in the beginning stage of this game as a left back, but now he's fallen out of the meta. I put him at the C tier position. He needs an evo. Okay, so now we have a good center back. Okay, next up we have Prime Hero Yapstam. This SBC is very good value. He does the job very well in game. He sits comfortably between the S and A tier spot. Now tomorrow we have a grassroots Yapstam. I would put him in the S tier position. And if you're lucky enough to even have his base card at the beginning stage of the game and throw him in the Team of the Year Evo, I have a review on my channel. That card sits comfortably in the S tier spot. Okay, so now we have Winter Wildcard Mascherano. This card's not very good in game. C tier spot for me. Okay, so next up we have Numero Foot John Stones. This card is a unit to go up against in game. His SBC was pretty expensive, but also great value, especially in the longer run stage of the game because of his alternative positions and playstyles. But this card sits comfortably between the A and S tier position. Okay, so now the next up we have on this list, we have Nathan Ake's FC Pro Live card. This card sits comfortably between B and A tier. All right, so next up we have Winter Wildcard Rolfo. I've used her in game. She isn't as good as her Foot Fantasy card SBC that we got last year. This card sits comfortably between B and A tier. But if you were to throw her into the Anticipate and Long Ball Evo, her card sits comfortably in that A tier position. Next up we have Ernie Paredes. This card isn't as great in game, very low pace. D tier, avoid. All right, so now we have Prime Hero Georges. Her card is decent, but not as good. She sits in the C tier spot for me. Next up, we have Season Ladder Munoz from Crystal Palace. His card is average. He's not very good, but he's also fallen out of the meta curve. He sits borderline B and C tier for me. Okay, so now we have Thunderstruck Koundé. This card is actually cracked in game. I've used him. He's very good. He sits borderline A and S tier for me. All right, so next up, we have Winter Wild card right back position Pedro Porro. This card has fallen out of the A tier spot for me. There's a lot better right backs now. He sits comfortably B tier. All right, next card we have is Champions League Arojo. This card sits in the A tier spot. He is cracked to go up against, and I wonder if he could get a future potential evolution. Next up, we have Future Stars Hincape. This card sits comfortably at the A tier spot. I've used him in game. He is actually very good. All right, so now the next card we have on this list is Team of the Year Honorable Mentions Johnston. This card isn't as good in game. Everybody was able to get him. He sits in the B tier spot for me. All right, so now the next card we have on this list is Yan Kuto. His right back Future Stars card is actually somewhat decent in game. He sits in the A tier spot for me. All right, so now the next card we have on this list is Diego Milito's center back card. Yup, they made a striker into center back. He isn't as good as Holland. He sits in the C tier spot for me. And the next card on the list, we have Basha. Her card is somewhat decent in game. She's borderline A and B tier. Okay, so now we have John Stone's other card. Again, we already went over this. He sits in that spot for me. Okay, so now the next card on this list, we have Numero Foot Jonathan Top. This card is S tier. That Anticipate Plus really helps this card. He has very good stats. He's quick, and he is a very good defender to use in game. His animations are on another level. Okay, now we have Numero Foot Anton. He's not as good. He's borderline B and A tier. Okay, so now we have Winter Wildcard Lavelle. She sits in the C tier spot for me. Okay, so now everyone's favorite left back card in the game, Theo Hernandez. I would tell you any Theo Hernandez card in the game right now is S tier. He is by far the best left back in the game so far, especially with the evolution that everyone else did. He sits in that S tier spot comfortably. Okay, so now the next card on this list, we have Centurion's Bremer. This card sits in the C tier spot for me. He's fallen out of the meta curve and he needs an Evo. Okay, so now we have Track Stars Ruben Diaz. He was a good value SBC at the beginning stage when we got that Track Stars SBC, but he's fallen out of the meta. He sits in that B tier spot for me. Okay, so now the next card we have on this list, we have Miguel Gutierrez. This card sits in the borderline A and B tier spot. Okay, so now we have another S tier nightmare of a right back. We have Dumfries. This card is insane. He is the right back Theo Hernandez if we had one. This card is insane. His animations are tough, and he's overall a very hard player to go up against. He feels like an icon. Okay, so now we have Future Stars Kirkes. This card is decent in game. He sits in the A tier spot for me. He's a little bit harder to link, but he also has the Premier League links. Okay, so the next card up on this list, we have Future Stars Nesta. Okay, so now the next card up on this list, we have Future Stars Nesta. I thought this card would be very good in game, but after playing him, he sits comfortably in the A tier position. Okay, so now one of my favorite SBCs, he was a club legend. We have Thunderstruck Desai. I would throw this card borderline A and B tier. He's fallen out of the meta curve. He was very good at the beginning stage of the game, but he needs an Evo. Okay, so now the next card we have on this list, we have Thunderstruck Throm. This card sits comfortably in the S tier position. If you gone up against him, you would know what I'm talking about. He is that guy on the right hand side. Okay, so now the next card we have on this list, we have Globetrotters Philip Lahm. This card's fallen out of the meta. He sits in the B tier spot. All right, so now we have Prime Hero Mycon. This card is like another Theo Hernandez, but he's fallen a little bit out of the meta curve. He was chilling in the S tier spot, but I would say he is borderline S and A tier. Okay, so now we have Thunderstruck Fernando Hero. I have him. He's somewhat decent. He isn't S tier anymore, but he does get the job done. He is borderline A and B tier. Okay, so now we have Swap Token Axel Witzel, center back. He sits in the B tier spot. He was cracked in the game when we first got him, but now he's fallen out of the meta. I would say he is borderline A and B tier. Okay, so now we have Dunk. This card is actually decent in game. I would put him borderline A and S tier. After playing him, he has very good animations. We have another swap token, Hatzabor. This card sits comfortably in the A tier spot. Okay, so now we have Europa League Romero. This card fallen out of the meta, but he sits in the B and A tier spot. Now we have Numero Foot Mappy Leon. She sits comfortably in the B tier spot. Swap token Tuta. This card sits in the A tier spot. He was a little bit of a unit to go up against, but now there's a lot better and more available center backs. He would have been S tier if I were to make this list a month ago, but he sits comfortably in that A tier position. FC Pro Bowie, he sits in that A tier position. He is somewhat decent in game, but you know, you're also going to be able to dribble by him because of his body type. Winter Wildcard, Vincent Kompany. He sits comfortably in that A tier position, but he could also get an evolution in the future. Who knows how good this card would be, but he sits in the A tier spot. Frimpong's Champions League card. This card is A tier, nothing too crazy, but he's also very good. Olga Carmona, she sits in the B tier position because she doesn't have the physicality that's needed as a left back. Numero Foot Balde. This card is cracked in game. He sits comfortably in the S tier position. Gurma, we all played her. She's not very good in game. She sits in the B tier position. Tinos, his Globetrotters, this card sits comfortably in the C tier position, and he also has a Team of the Year honorable mentions SBC. This card's actually good in game. I would put him in the A tier position. Future Stars Pau Kubarsi. I was lucky enough to pack this card in game. He was able to shut down Mbappe and all the other pacey, sweaty, speed-boosting wingers or strikers. I would put him S tier. He's pretty surprising in game, even though he has low physicality. I slap Anchor on him, and he gets the job done for me. He is S tier. Okay, so we have another swap tokens, that being Gosens. He is borderline A and B tier. He's actually pretty cracked in game, but you know, he's fallen out of the meta curve. We're in February now. He would have been A tier if it were last month. Here, honorable mentions DeMarco. His SBC is pretty good value. He sits comfortably in the A tier spot. Okay, so now the next card we have on this list, we have Flashback Team of the Year, João Cancelo. Due to his versatility and added playstyles, he sits comfortably in the S tier position. And I wonder how good this card would be in the future when he gets that next Evo. But he is very fun to use in game due to his unique animations and what he has to offer for your team. Future Stars, Lucas Barado. This card sits comfortably in the A tier spot. I do feel like some Future Star cards are lacking a couple animations or playstyles, and this is one of the cards that actually paid the price. I would say Kubarsi is better than him, and this card could have been potentially up there, but I feel like next year this card would be good. Next up, we have swap token LaCroix. Nothing too crazy here. He sits comfortably in the A and B tier spot. Okay, so next up we have on this list, we have Team of the Year Cannavaro. I packed this card, played him for a few games, and I'm not a fan of how he is in game because of his height. He does get the job done defensively. He sits comfortably in the A tier spot. Okay, so now we have Team of the Year Ronald Koeman. I like this card a lot better as a center defensive mid role, but this card chills right next to Team of the Year Cannavaro. Nothing too crazy, but he does get the job done sitting in the A tier spot. Okay, so now the next card we have on this list, we have Numero Foot Kyle Walker. He sits comfortably in the S tier spot. I shouldn't have to say anything else. It's just like saying Theo Hernandez. Where does he go? Kyle Walker is just up there. He's not better than Theo Hernandez, but he's also a nightmare to go up against, especially with higher rated and formatted stats added to his newer cards. Future Stars, Bobby Moore. This card isn't as good in game. He's like another Cannavaro and Ronald Koeman. He sits comfortably in the A tier spot. Everyone's club legend, Konate. He's fallen out a little bit out of the meta, but he sits borderline A and S tier due to how cracked Anticipate is in the game. This card will perform for you in champs, but he also has one of those moments where he doesn't perform as well as once he did a month ago, but he sits in the A tier spot. Track Stars, Lucio. I never gone up against this card, especially in the Elite Division. I would put him in the S tier due to his price being 1.3 million, but I would put him borderline A and S tier. Okay, so now we have Future Stars, Lenny Oro. This card has a lot of hype and potential, but again, I haven't gone up this card enough. I would put him A and S tier. Numero Foot Eder Militao. This card is cracked to go up against in game. I don't like playing against this card. He sits comfortably in the S tier position. Base Maldini. This card sits comfortably between A and S tier. He has a better card available, so that one will sit in the S tier position. And his Globetrotters, easy S tier spot. Every time I go up against this card, he always wins the ball and gets the job done. All right, so now we have Future Stars Rio Ferdinand. This card's an easy S tier spot. Even if you have his Evo, I would say that they're almost on the same level, but his Future Stars is much better because he has better stats and 2 added playstyles. Next up, we have Globetrotters Baresi. He isn't crazy in game. He sits borderline B and C tier for me. All right, so now I'm fortunate enough to pack Roberto Carlos Team of the Year. I would say he's very automatic. Sits comfortably in the S tier spot for me. Carlos Alberto's Winter Wild Cards, he's very good in game, but I feel like he's falling out of the meta curve. I would say he sits borderline A and S tier. Team of the Year honorable mentions, Rudiger. This card's a little bit of a nightmare to go up against, but he doesn't have the playstyles that I want as a center back. He sits in that A tier spot. And for the remaining defenders, there shouldn't be a question for what goes into the S tier spot. Without a doubt, there shouldn't be any question what goes into S tier. However, with these 2 Team of the Year defenders, Paredes and Lucy FC Bronze, they sit comfortably in the A tier spot due to their height and bad animations and lack of playstyles. They sit in the A tier spot as a Team of the Year card. Erling Haaland, his Winter Wild card is very good in game. He sits in that S tier spot due to his height and strength and unique animations. He's very hard to get past with your strikers and wingers. Now for the rest of the cards, Team of the Year Cafu, easy S tier spot. Van Dijk's Champions League card, easy S tier spot as well. And the rest of these cards, S tier. Here's the rest of my list. I also reordered what I thought goes best for S tier. Now Van Dijk and Saliba is a toss up for whoever the best center back is in the game currently. And then these are the remaining defenders that I put in order from best to worst in the S tier spot. But with the A and B and C tier and D tier positions, I did not rank anyone from best to worst. Let me know in the comment section below for what you guys think of this list and what I should do for my next tier list video. That'll be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more FC25 videos. And be sure to hit that bell button so you never miss out on the next video. I'll have more content coming out for the Grassroots promo that releases tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Also, follow me on X. The link is in the description. But with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.